Pola. I'm Sangay Wangdi. Title for my research paper for the month of October was Bhutanese Civil Servants Living to Australia, Study on Reasons for Living and Motivation to Return. Firstly, to set the context, according to RCS's annual report 2020 to 2021, there were over 31,000 civil servants in Bhutan as of June 2021, with civil servants to population ratio at 1:24, which is believed to be among the highest in the region. And also, according to a record obtained from RCC, in past 5 years, a little over 1,200 civil servants resigned while on extraordinary leave, and 90 civil servants resigned while undergoing long-term training. And as of October 2021, there were another 285 civil servants on EOL and 801 civil servants undergoing long-term training outside Bhutan. And Bhutanese civil service has observed growth in number of civil servants every year, which has led to a cumulative growth of 107.75% as of 30 June 2021 compared to the number on 30 September 2003. Thus, considering the annual growth rate of number of Bhutanese civil servants, attrition does not seem to be a major human resource management issue in Bhutan. However, losing employees or talents in any number of forms will be a problem for the organization, as it will lead to deterioration of performances, loss of institutional memory or loss of productivity, efficiency, maybe even loss of work team harmony, and also social goodwill of the organization. Thus, considering the above cited number of Bhutanese civil servants leaving the system, it should be considered an HR management issue in Bhutan as well, despite the annual growth rate in the number of Bhutanese civil servants. That's why I have attempted to study why Bhutanese civil servants leave, especially to Australia, as it seems to be the trend, and also try to find out some possible motivational factors that would encourage them to return home. The objective of study was to find out factors leading to resignation from service and leave to Australia among Bhutanese civil servants, to figure out what would motivate them to return home, and to provide some relevant recommendations to prevent voluntary resignation among Bhutanese civil servants, and to encourage those who have already resigned to return home. And for the literature review, I have referred to some literature relevant to the topic found in OpenNet, and according to the literature referred to, some major reasons causing the employee turnover are compensation or salary. Money is the culprit, as they say, because employees leave the organization when they were paid inadequately, or they leave for an organization who would pay them higher. Working environment, lack of career mobility and challenges, high level of stress and lack of work-life balance, lack of confidence in supervision, lack of employee job fit. People also leave when they do not get well integrated into the system, lack of role clarity, lack of proper feedback, inability to use one's competency, boss and his management style, lack of independence of freedom and autonomy, lack of learning opportunities, lack of excitement and innovation in the job. A mixed method of qualitative and quantitative was employed for the study. A set of structured questionnaire was developed to collect information from Buddhists in Australia who are or were civil servants in some point of their life. Employee turnover factors found in those referred literatures were used to frame the question. The snowball sampling method was adopted to collect the information, whereby I have referred the question to someone whom I know in Australia, and they have been requested to refer it to someone they know in Australia. And a total of 37 responses has been received, and the data collected via Google form has been analyzed using some basic functions of Stata and Excel. Now going for response compilation and discussion. Of 37 responses received, 62% of them were male and 38% of them were female. And going by the age of the respondents, Bhutanese civil servants seem to be living to Australia at the peak of their economically active or productive age. As their mean age was 35, even median was 35, their mode age was 37, minimum age was 29, and maximum age was 45. Even qualification-wise, those who live to Australia seem to be highly qualified, as 41% of them had master's degree, 90% had postgraduate diploma, 27% had bachelor's degree, and only 11% had diploma, and 3% had BHSC and below. Bhutanese civil servants living to Australia seem to be a recent phenomenon among Bhutanese civil servants, as a combined 79% of them has been there for only 3 or lesser years, and only 10% of them has been there for 5 or more years. In a month, some Bhutanese in Australia earn even more than the annual income of P5 level civil servants in Bhutan, as there are around 32% of them who earn more than 300,000 a month. There are around 35% of them who earn between 200,000 to 300,000 a month, and next 30% who earn between 100,000 to 200,000 a month, and only 3% of them say they would earn anywhere between 50,000 to 100,000 a month. A trend of going to Australia among Bhutanese civil servants seems to be common among those civil servants who have joined the service in the year 2008 or later, as there were 81% of the respondents who have joined the civil service in the year 2008 or later. And as for the superstructure and position level of those civil servants who have left Australia, many of them have joined civil service under the superstructure of administration service and technical service, and at the position level of P4 and P5. But these may need further exploration, as it might have been biased due to the snowballing sampling method. And while seeing the superstructure and position level of those who left prior to leaving, it was found that many of them have left without change in superstructure of their service, but they have left after their first promotion. It's because while finding the position level when they joined the civil service, majority of them joined at P5 and P4, and likewise prior to leaving to Australia, many or majority of them held the position level of P3 and P4. Like 27% of them were into P3 and 30% of them were into P4 prior to leaving to Australia. That means they have left to Australia after their first promotion. While seeing the initial reason of leaving to Australia and the initial mode of leaving to Australia, it was found that majority of them, 62% of them went for studies, but only 14% of them has chose to go on study leave. Majority of them, 51% of them has extraordinary leave, and 35% of them went after resignation. Out of 24 of them who went either on EOL or study leave, 79% of them have already resigned, and only 21% of them have not resigned yet, but 3 of them were already intending to resign. So that means out of 37 civil servants in Australia, only 2, that is 5% of them, will still be part of civil service. And to find out the reasons for resigning from the Royal Civil Service, they were asked to rate those 13 factors in the scale of 1 to 5, 1 being least or not at all, and 5 being the factor that has extremely affected their decision to resign from the civil service. Those 13 factors were derived from the literature reviews that I have done as cited earlier. However, from the responses provided, it was not clear to rank the reasons. So that's why I have tried to find out the mean response score. Looking at the mean score, all the factors have somehow slightly to certain or large extent have affected or caused their decision to resign from the civil service. And from the mean response score, it was found out that the top 4 reasons that have caused them to resign from the civil service was lack of career mobility at a mean score of 3.4, and the prospect of having better exposure or experience with a mean score of 3.3, inadequate compensation or salary with a mean response score of 3.2, and lack of proper feedback in the system with mean score of 3.2. And another effort was made to try to find out what would motivate them to return home. But prior to this, they were asked on how satisfied they were with the work that they do in Australia. And it was found that most of them were very much or very satisfied with the work that they do in Australia. And male were found to be more satisfied with the work they do compared to their female counterpart. As there were 40% of male who said they are very satisfied with the work they do compared to 38% of female, and then there were 40% of male who said satisfied with just 15% of female, and 38% of female said that they are neither satisfied nor dissatisfied but there were only 15% of male who said, and there were also some little portion of them who said they were very dissatisfied with the work they do, but it was only 5% of male and 8% of female. Since the survey did not study other aspects of their work in Australia besides the average monthly income, their job satisfaction level there could be attributed to the monthly income they earn in Australia at the moment. However, to figure out it well, it would be important to study the other aspects of the work that they do as well in Australia. As part of motivational factors, they were asked if they would have considered not resigning from the civil servants if the duration of EOL was extendable. And for these, 48% of them said yes, and 21% of them said maybe, and 30% of them said no. And among male and females, males were most likely to have not resigned if EOL duration was extendable. As majority of female, like 46% of them said just maybe, and 38% of them said no. 38% of females said that they would not have considered not resigning even the duration of EOL was extendable. It could be because female respondents were not motivated to consider not resigning with extension of EOL, as only 14% of them have able EOL to go to Australia. So thus extension of EOL duration was no more applicable to them. And 50% of female have already resigned from civil service while going to Australia, compared to 74% of males who have initially went on EOL to go to Australia. So that's why many male would have considered not resigning from civil service if the duration of EOL was extendable. And they were also asked if they would consider returning home if they were allowed to re-enter into civil service once they are back home, even after their resignation. And a majority, 52% of them said yes, and 33% of them said maybe, and only 15% of them said no. Here too, mostly men would be interested to return to Bhutan if they were allowed to re-enter into civil service, as 70% of them said yes, against only 23% of female who said yes. And in the category of who said no, there were only 10% of males against 23% of female. In conclusion, Bhutanese civil servants initially go to Australia to study, as said by almost 62% of them, but not many or almost all of them do not return after completion of their studies. They ultimately resign from civil service to prolong their stay in Australia, perhaps to increase their earning and their saving. And thus, one would wonder how many of those 801 civil service who are undergoing long-term training outside Bhutan, as shared in the background earlier, we would wonder how many of them would return after completion of their studies. The top 4 reasons to have contributed to a large extent in their decision to resign are lack of career mobility, prospect of having better experience or exposure outside, inadequate compensation or salary, and lack of proper feedback in the system. Lack of proper feedback in the system could be understood to be inclusive of the employee rating system, or rather called max moderation system of the RCSC. And finally, the ultimate factor that attracts many Bhutanese civil servants to Australia could be the earning opportunities in Australia, as 67% of them reported to be earning any amount above nil term 200,000 a month, with 32% of them earning even more than nil term 300,000 a month, which is, as said earlier, even more than the annual income of a P5 level civil servant in Bhutan. Finally, to these studies, I would like to provide, or rather propose, these 2 recommendations. First, extend the duration of extraordinary leave to at least 4 years. According to the BCSR 2018, as per the clause number 10.12.1, EOL shall be granted to a civil servant up to a maximum period of 24 months, including weekends and government holidays, in total during the entire service. And the next clause 10.12.5 says, EOL shall not be counted as active service for the purpose of all HR actions such as promotion, training, etc. And then the next clause 10.12.6 says, remuneration and other benefits of the post held shall not be granted to a civil servant for the days of EOL. Thus, considering these clauses, a civil servant on EOL shall not be of any economic loss to the government. However, this may create a temporary disruption into functionality or services in the system. However, I think it would be a better option than to lose a civil servant forever. I mean to say, having disruption in the functionality or services for 4 years would be a better option than to lose a civil servant forever due to inadequate duration of EOL. Second one was to allow re-entry into civil service, or rather open multiple entry points into the Royal Civil Service in Bhutan. Currently, according to the clause number 4.4.3 of BCSR 2018, any new recruitment into civil service shall only be at the entry position level. Thus, having a multi-entry level into civil service would encourage those resigned civil service who are in Australia or any other parts of country or parts of country outside to return to Bhutan and reapply to become a civil servant again. However, they may be allowed to apply for the position level not above than the one they held before they resigned from the civil service. This is because, they were asked open-endedly on one of the reasons for not returning home, they said that it was due to lack of productive engagement once back into country. They say that since they have already resigned from civil service, even if they return home, they may not be able to engage in any other productive work, as they cannot reapply to become a civil servant again. So that's why I have provided these two recommendations. Thank you everyone for your kind attention. Thank you.